everybody, and welcome to episode number 5 of Career Club's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bob Goodwin, your host and the founder of Career Club. If you're not familiar with Career Club, you can check us out at, ironically, career.club, and where our mission is using proven sales methods and tools to help you find a career that matters to you. As I said, you can learn more at www.career.club. This is a live stream, so please feel free to comment. We'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. So if you want to just drop that into the chat or comment section, that would be great. But as we go through today's discussion, if there's topics that are of interest to you, questions that you've got, we would really encourage your participation. This is for you. So please join the conversation. As always, I want to say thank you to my colleague, Heather Zinzer, who is the brains and magic behind making this happen. So Heather, thank you. And today's topic is crafting the pitch. And so when we're in job search, obviously getting the message right and being able to do that in a cogent and compelling way is critical. And I am over the moon to have our guest on today, Hannah Mason. Hannah is a LinkedIn top voice in job search and career advice. She's got over 600,000 followers on LinkedIn. She's been featured by LinkedIn on their own lives, going out to tens of thousands of people, and is just an acknowledged expert in resume, or as we might say across the pond, CVs and interviewing. So with that, welcome, Hannah.
Hi, Bob. Thanks so much for having me on today. Really excited.
No, it's such a pleasure to have you. And now, Hannah, you're the proprietor of the English Meeting Room, yes? So maybe you just might want to tell folks, hey, where the heck did that name come from? And just a little bit about your business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in recruitment, and I was actually in Dubai for a number of years recruiting in the legal sector. And one of my other interests is teaching English, actually. So I'm also qualified to teach English as a foreign language. So after I had my baby girl, I was doing some freelance English teaching and realized that actually one of the main things that people needed help with was crafting career documents, crafting their CVs, and being able to articulate their skills and experience. And it was from that the English Meeting Room was born, initially to help non-native English speakers with their career documents, but it's since evolved into a kind of international business where we help people from all over the world with their CVs and with their job search.
No, that's awesome. And so if people want to find you online, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. The website is theenglishmeetingroom.com. That's one word. That's the best place to find me. Everything's on there. But obviously, I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I share weekly or multiple times a week on LinkedIn. And if you search Hannah Mason, I should come up. And I expect perhaps linked in this post in any case.
Yep, exactly. So one of the little traditions, if you can have traditions after 5 episodes, is we like to do just a few icebreaker questions that we affectionately call Rocks Fab 5 after a friend of mine that inspired these. So you've already kind of touched a little bit on a couple of them, but just first of all, you've got a beautiful accent. So we'll start with, where were you born and raised?
Yeah, so I'm from the UK. I was born on the south coast near a town called Brighton, or a city called Brighton, if anyone knows that. As I mentioned, I lived in Dubai for 8 years, and now I'm actually back in the UK, but I've moved back to my husband's country, which is Wales. So I'm now in Cardiff, which is the capital of Wales.
Awesome. So Brighton, Hove Albion. There, I said everything you know about Brighton.
Yeah, that's it.
No, fabulous football club. So next question is just a little bit about your education.
Yeah, so we were just talking about this, Bob, actually. My background's a bit non-traditional. So I finished high school, or college, as we call it in the UK, and was signed up to do a degree, had my place at university, and really decided I'm not sure if that's a path for me. I was seeing lots of people come out of university and start entry-level jobs in debt, having spent 4 years studying. So I decided to postpone that. And I joined a bank in the UK in an entry-level position. And within a couple of years, I'd already worked my way up into management roles and, alas, never went to university.
So just side note, I love that story. There's several people who are very close to me, my family and friends, who share a similar experience. And I think that, I just want people to be encouraged that it is like more than okay to have a non-traditional career path, non-traditional education path, right? Because if you've got the smarts and the work ethic, you're going to be successful. So I appreciate the transparency and you sharing that for everybody who might be listening.
Yeah, and I think, with the cost of university now as well, it's really something you have to weigh up. Certain career paths, it's definitely needed, but there's lots of career paths where you might be financially better off by kind of learning as you go.
Yep, exactly. Now you mentioned your daughter, so just a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I've got a 5-year-old girl who's very excited because it's Christmas at the moment, and we just got a puppy actually last month. So we're very busy with our new puppy and training him, and he's very cute.
What kind of dog and what's his name?
His name is DJ. My daughter named him, and he's a Maltipoo, which is a Maltese crossed with a poodle. So very small and very fluffy.
Our daughter wanted to name our youngest son, and she was going to name him Spoon. So we decided not to go with that one.
Yeah, you kind of veto that, yeah.
Now, you kind of touched on, like, early in your career, like in banking. Do you mind just sort of sharing kind of like a quick overview of your career arc?
Yeah, so I started off working for a retail bank, started in kind of customer service and worked my way through sort of sales management and branch management positions, which is where I really learned a lot of kind of sales techniques, actually, which I know we're going to be discussing later.
Yep.
And then from there, I moved to Dubai, and that's when I got into recruitment. And recruitment is essentially a sales job. You're selling your services to clients in order to win their business. You're selling opportunities to candidates. You're then selling those candidates into roles and to your kind of clients, to the companies. And I really enjoyed recruitment.
Yeah.
I was recruiting for the legal sector, so working with lawyers. And because I was in Dubai, I got to meet people from all over the world as well.
No, that's awesome. And then just real quick, when you're not chasing a puppy around, chasing a little girl around, whatever, what are other things? What are your kind of passions or interests or hobbies?
Oh, I don't have time for much else. I quite like cooking. But yeah, I don't have time for too much else with all of that and running a business as well.
Yeah, well, that is a lot to keep you busy. So we'll dive into the topic here in just a second. James, welcome. Thanks so much. And James knows that I've talked before about RocksFab 5, and just, as a relationship building technique, we tend to buy from people that we trust, and we trust people that we like. And one of the ways that we get to like people is by learning more about them and by being interested in them, and then finding those connection points. So like you said, Brighton, and I immediately went to football, right? Because I love following the Premier League. And but there's just different things to connect with people. So thank you for doing that. So today's topic is crafting the pitch. And, as you said on your LinkedIn post, and as we've kind of talked beforehand, a job search is a big sales and marketing exercise. The product is you, right? And one of the things that we talk about at Career Club is the 4 Ps, which are, I need to understand what's the product that I'm selling. That's me. What's my unique value proposition, right? What problems do I solve for employers? The second P, which is what we're going to talk about a lot here, is the pitch. So how do I, once I've unearthed the value proposition, the product, how do I communicate that in such a way that I can do it cogently, not rambling, and compellingly in a way that's persuasive, right? And do it in a way that across media types, CV, LinkedIn, cover letter, email, networking, whatever, that my message is consistent and synchronized. And then just to finish out the 4 Ps, now that I know what my product is and how to talk about it, who are my prospects for that? How do I go target my search? And then having a process, CRM tool, sales funnel kind of a mentality and the discipline to follow through on all those things. But today we're going to talk mostly about crafting the pitch. So one of the reasons that I was so excited to have you on was I found a post that you had done a few weeks ago about a client of yours named Chris, who sounds like you were on holiday or away from the office for a few days, and you came back to an email that said, thank you. I was wondering if you could just kind of at a high level sort of share that story.
Yeah, so he was a client that I worked with actually a number of months back. And, I work with lots of clients, and sometimes you work with people and you think, this person, they really are going to get a job. You're quite confident because they present themselves well. They really know what they're going for. They really know their numbers. They've got a really clear track record. And Chris was definitely one of those people. So I did his CV for him. We did his LinkedIn profile as well. And off he went to look for a job and start applying for positions. And he came back to me a number of months later and said, I didn't want to tell you before because I didn't want to jinx it, but I actually got a job really quickly after we spoke, and I've just been waiting for the visa process and everything, and I'm starting soon. And in my post that I shared on LinkedIn, I shared some of the reasons why I think he was successful in that process. And I think, that's what we're going to be kind of breaking down a bit more today and looking at.
And right before we head to that, could you talk for just a minute about the importance of your CV and your LinkedIn profile kind of being in alignment?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's a really important thing. I was working with someone the other week who had quite a kind of unusual career timeline in terms of doing different roles at different times. And he'd streamlined that somewhat on his CV, but he hadn't matched up with his LinkedIn profile. And I said, that's a huge red flag for employers because as a recruiter, at some point in the process, you're going to be looking at the person's LinkedIn profile. If it isn't right away, when you're evaluating the application, you're going to look at it before deciding that you invite them for an interview or perhaps in the interview process. And so if there's big inconsistencies there, it just calls a lot into question. Calls into question your integrity, which one of these versions is true. But even if it's not that severe, it perhaps calls into question your priorities. If on your LinkedIn you say that you're looking for a job in X and your CV saying something else, which one is the right thing? So it's really important that they're aligned. They don't have to be mirror copies of one another because they serve slightly different purposes, but they should certainly be produced in conjunction with one another.
Yeah, I mean, definitely reinforcing the key messages and providing that being a synchronized message. The way that I say it is like, I don't want to look at your resume and then your LinkedIn profile and feel like I'm talking to two different people.
Yeah.
It's like, the best thing you can say is you're confusing me. And then it can go all the way to like, which one do you really want to be here? I don't know what to believe, which is probably not a good spot to find yourself in.
Yeah, absolutely.
But with all that said, the post, you're right. You identified kind of three main areas that Chris did really well and gave you confidence that he was going to be quite successful in his job pursuit. And the first one was around, like he knew what he wanted. He kind of knew what the target looked like. He had clarity around that. And sometimes what I see, it's what I call the junk drawer, because people are like, well, I've done HR and sales and marketing and operations. Like you can do any of those. And it's like, no, you can't. Like nobody's really good in all of those. Those are fairly disparate functions to claim expertise or mastery in. And so the way our minds work is like, if I don't know where to put you, then what do we do at home with stuff we don't know what to do? It goes in the junk drawer. And we don't go back to the junk drawer unless we're desperate because we've looked everywhere else.
Yeah.
Right. So, first of all, could you just start off? This should be a pretty easy one, but the importance of having clarity.
Yeah, I think you've really kind of nailed it there in terms of it's really important that the recruiter knows what to do with you, for one. That's perhaps one of the main reasons. A recruiter that's recruiting a position, they've got a specific set of requirements they're looking at. They're looking to fill that particular role. And so when they're evaluating your profile, they need to clearly see that you're a good fit for that. And if your profile's just too generic, if you're trying to cover too many bases, you're just not going to do that effectively. So that's absolutely one of the key reasons. But I think another reason is you don't want to waste time on positions which aren't going to be right for you ultimately. The job search is can be a draining process as it is.
Yes.
And I've sometimes had people come to me and they say, I've applied for 200 roles, I'm not getting anywhere. And that becomes really, really frustrating. But often I think that happens when you've cast the net too wide and you're actually applying for roles which aren't really right for you for whatever reason. So by having a more clarity in your search, having more clearly defined parameters to what you're looking for, you're going to not get into that position where you're just applying for so many things that it just feels out of control and like you're not getting anywhere, and you can focus.
So how would you counsel somebody who's listening to this right now or on replay, who's struggling with that? Maybe they've been in different industries, different functional areas, but for some reason they're sort of struggling with, and it almost feels counterintuitive to them. Why do I want to make this smaller rather than bigger? I want to have more opportunities open. How would you counsel them to kind of how to get to that clarity?
I think people tend to fall into kind of one or two different categories here. That there's the people who really don't know what they want to do with their lives and soul searching, and perhaps they've got the time to do that. And I think, if you're in that position, it really is worth going through that process first before you embark on your job search. Don't use your job search as a means of figuring that out. I'll just apply for lots of different things and see what sticks. Do that process first, perhaps find a coach that specializes in that. That's not really what I do. I tend to help people once they've got that clarity. But there's lots of people who you can speak to. There's lots of good resources in order to do that kind of soul searching exercise and figure out what really excites you and what really motivates you. But I think a lot of people fall into a second category, which is they kind of do know, but they've just not really taken the time to define it to themselves. And they've not really sat down and thought about it. They've just kind of, I think it's tempting when you're looking for a job just to go online, see what's out there, and you evaluate each job as it comes through and think, oh, I could do that. I'm going to apply for that. I think I could do that. Oh, that's a bit out of my area, but that sounds interesting. I'll apply for that. And I think a lot of us just naturally fall into that kind of method of job searching. But it's just much more effective if you take a step back and first ask yourself, okay, what is my ideal job? What job titles are a match for me? What positions are a match for me based on my experience? What locations realistically am I willing to travel to? And don't go searching for things outside of that. What salary realistically would I accept? And don't be searching for things outside of those parameters. So I do have an ebook which is called The Essential Steps for a Successful Job Search, where I kind of go through that process in a bit more detail, which is on my website. But I think it's definitely worth getting that clarity, defining as many of the parameters as possible, and even thinking about target companies and being more proactive in your search, which I know is something that you're very good at, Bob, with your CRM system. It's got lots of potential target companies that people can think about and actively approach. And so it's starting from that perspective rather than just kind of seeing what's out there and making a decision each time you see something.
I'd like to riff on a couple of things that you've said so far because they really resonate. One is back on, kind of person number one who's using the job search to kind of explore what they might be interested in. I call that airing bad commercials. Again, I'm going to use a super American reference here, like with the Super Bowl. That's the number one advertising venue of the year, full stop. And say, hey, I bought a Super Bowl ad. We're getting in front of so many people. Way to go. But your commercial was terrible. You just like put this out in front of way too many people because you did not have a great ad that you were running. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times when people, particularly if they've lost a job and they just immediately jump into networking, but they don't know what they want yet, and you're meeting with lots of people, like you're just burning up potentially really good opportunities because you don't have a message yet. Right? You don't know what your pitch is yet, right? And so people walk away going, I don't know how to help Bob. I don't know what he's looking for. He doesn't know what he's looking for.
Yeah.
Right. And then the second bit on the person that's just like applying for a bunch of stuff online, you know, unfortunately, this is one of the reasons that companies have had to resort to applicant tracking systems, right? And all the rules and logic to filter out all the people that shouldn't even be applying for this job. Unfortunately, those nets also kick out a lot of really good candidates. But it's sort of an unintended and unfortunate consequence to, I think, a little bit of what we see even with how companies are selecting people.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, if I posted a job for a finance lawyer, for example, even if I wrote on the first line of the job description, this is a role for a qualified lawyer, I would get countless applications from accountants and finance professionals because they've done a keyword search with the word finance and they've just hit apply through all of the job adverts. And yeah, absolutely, that's a problem. And that's not a good approach for anybody in the kind of the job search cycle.
Yeah. And then now Kelly's, and Kelly, great to see you. Thank you. Where he's saying he thinks it's important for each person to work through the questions that might pop up in the interview from the interviewer's perspective, where he's seeing too many people who hadn't thought of the answers ahead of time and then stammered to make them up in the interview. Again, and we'll talk about this maybe a little bit more as we go, but it's again being on message. And where Kelly's talking about stammering, you know, I talk about convictions lead to clarity, and clarity leads to confidence, and confidence is contagious. So when I'm stammering,
you're good at your alliterations, Bob.
I can't. I do speak alliteration, but the point is like, if I'm lacking clarity and then I'm just trying to guess the right answer from the interviewer's perspective, that's pretty clear. You know, and you're basically trying to guess, what does Hannah think the right answer is? Well, Hannah's not going to believe whatever I'm saying because I don't believe what I'm saying because I lack that clarity. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's why it's an essential step to get right, because I think if you start your job search without that, it impacts every way along, all the way to the interview process.
Absolutely. So let's kind of move on from clarity, because this next piece is again like really core to my religion in this, which is knowing your numbers. So can you kind of pick that up and why you think it's so important that people know their numbers and what you mean by that?
Yeah. So I think it's understanding the difference that you've made in the organization. And I think, one thing that we talked about before, Bob, was the difference between adjectives and achievements. And one of the first kind of rules in selling that you learn is to sell benefits and not features. And I think when a lot of people sit down to write their LinkedIn profile or to write their CV, they go into this mode of describing themselves and using adjectives, which are your features. So I'm a hardworking, diligent, organized, detail-oriented professional, these types of phrases. And actually, there's a much more effective way, which is selling the benefits, and that's selling your achievements, using your numbers to back that up. So one thing I've been thinking about is when Apple launched the iPod in 2001, they had a very, very famous marketing campaign, and the strapline was 1,000 songs in your pocket. And it's famous because the iPad became a best-selling product that we still remember. We don't remember any other MP3 players from that period. But when Apple was thinking of that strapline, they asked themselves, what problem does this product solve for the customer, and how can we communicate that as clearly and concisely as possible? And they could have talked about the fact that the iPod had 5 gigabytes of memory, that it was white. They could have given its dimensions. And, that's explaining something's features. That's using these adjectives to describe something. And it wouldn't have been a successful marketing campaign. But it was successful because the consumer instantly understood how this product would benefit them. And that kind of number 1000 is even more helpful. So the same is true for your LinkedIn headline, for your CV. If you can quickly identify really concisely and clearly what benefit you will bring to the organization, that's really compelling. And how that kind of fits into your CV is I really think it's best to have this as a headline right underneath your name. So as soon as the person opens up the document, that's the thing that stands out and that's what hits them.
What might be an example of that, just off the top of your head? What might one sound like?
I mean, it's so, if you're a salesperson, it might be leading sales teams to generate $1 million in revenue per year. It could be something like that. Or perhaps if you're in IT, it could be, delivering large scale digital transformation projects. You're quite quickly pinpointing what it is you can do for the organization. And you want to align that to the job description as well and to the company that you're applying for. Each company that's hiring, they've got a problem they're looking for the person to solve. If you can right away show that you are the person to solve that problem for them, by explaining the benefit that you'll have on the organization, I think that's much more impactful than just describing yourself and giving lots of adjectives, which can sometimes just lose their meaning.
Yes. Creative problem solver, strategic thinker, blah, blah, blah. It's like, I don't even know what to do. High integrity. Well, who's not? Like who's going to say, I'm a low integrity person. but I guess, as I've spoken with so many people over the years, as a salesperson, I live in a black and white world. You have a quota of $1 million. You are, 101% of your quota or 99.9% of your quota. And like people know exactly where they landed on that. How do you work with people where they might feel a little removed from knowing what their quote number is or numbers are?
Numbers don't just have to be sales results. They don't have to just be how much money you saved or how much money you generated for the business. There's lots of other ways that you can quantify what you've done. So, is it the size of the team that you managed? What was the budget of the project that you were managing? Is it efficiency and time that you've saved? So, I mean, depending on your job function, there might be a different angle to look at. And, I think it's important as well just to think about those numbers and don't just include numbers for the sake of it. If it really doesn't sound impressive, if the scale really doesn't match the organization that you're applying for, then it might be better to not include it. But where you have got a metric which can back up your statement and is going to be impressive to the reader, it's always worth using it.
Yep. No, that's awesome. And hey, Mark, thanks so much. I'm glad that you're enjoying this. And as Heather said, this is alive. So if you've got questions or comments, please feel free to drop them in the comment section and we'll do our best to address them. You said something a minute ago, and I would double click on this a little bit with a client, is there's three main ways that we do contribute at a company, that at least that I've learned over the years. Did we make money, save money, or mitigate risk somehow? And, if I'm like in marketing and say maybe, and this is my background, so this is kind of a real example, I'm in consumer insights and we did a segmentation study. Bob, I don't know exactly how to quantify that segmentation study exactly. But if we can, sometimes talking with people who are our internal clients. What did you guys end up doing with this? Oh my gosh, you kidding me? We use this for an ad campaign that allowed us to much more effectively target, consumers online. And what we saw was this kind of a yield from being able to use the segmentation model.
Yeah.
I'm in accounting. Yeah, we deal with numbers all day, but I'm a receivables clerk. Yeah, but if you increase cash flow, and you guys, that cash flow was improved by 8% over a wide period of time, and this is $100 million business, you can start to kind of do that.
Yeah.
And then I also find, just in general, kind of like, hey, do you remember that project, Hannah, that we worked on a couple of years ago? With the construction company in Dubai. Like, I never really heard, how did that all play out? What happened? Oh my gosh, that was a wild success, et cetera, et cetera. So, sourcing from other people who might be able to fill in some of the blanks in the story. I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great idea. And I think also one thing which is really good is to not leave this until you need to update your CV or resume. I think that's the biggest mistake people make. You think that you'll remember your successes, you'll think that you remember the details. The reality is most of us don't. If you've been in the same company for 10 years and you haven't had to update your CV or resume, the likelihood is you're just not going to remember some of those big wins, from more than a year ago. So I think it's really helpful just to have a document on your computer where you keep note of this stuff as it happens, as it comes through. It's something we should all be kind of continually thinking about, continually updating. You especially don't want to be in a position where perhaps you've been made redundant suddenly, you've got to put together a CV or resume, you've not got access to that information, and suddenly you're scrambling to put it all together. So I think that's also
it's
the key
phenomenal
thing anyone should think about.
I mean, my memory's terrible. So like I kind of live in the present. What happened yesterday is what happened. So I love that idea of maybe having like a Google Doc or a Google Sheet where you're just you're kind of memorializing things in the moment. Two other use cases that immediately come to mind are preparing for your review. What do you think you did well this year, Hannah? What do you think you can improve? Well, oh God, I forgot about that. Was 6 months ago. And I'm forgot all about it, but that was really well done what we did. And then also in terms of being able to negotiate a raise.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got, again, kind of those reasons to believe. You have real proof points of how you've impacted the business that's deserving of additional compensation.
Yeah, exactly. It serves multiple purposes.
Oh, so let's go back a couple questions here. So we're going to go back to Clarity for half of a second. And James is asking a question on Clarity. How would you think about listing a survival job? So I went and worked at Home Depot for 6 months because I just needed, to be generating some income, even though that isn't really, what I want to be highlighting on my CV, or that's not the real role I'm after.
I think it depends slightly on the chronology of it and for how long that role was. So if it is something that was just for a few months, then I think it may not be worth including because it's going to sort of disrupt that career narrative. And it might be that you can even sort of hide that position by just listing the years of your experience rather than the months and years. I think especially if it's kind of your latest job, when recruiters are reading CVs, they read from the top down. And what you don't want them to do is read that position and think, oh, this person's not got the skills the experience I'm looking for, and not get to the kind of the good meaty stuff that you want them to see. But there are scenarios where perhaps it's a longer period of time and you kind of need to keep it in there to show what you were doing. In which case, I think, especially with COVID and with the upheaval of the last few years, there's no shame in that. I think a lot of HR teams are just much more aware that that's the reality for a lot of people. And so I think you just state it clearly. But what I would do is make sure that your core skills and experience that are relevant for the role you're applying for are heavily featured in the top half of your CV. So this isn't the first thing that they see. Perhaps have a key achievements section where you can pull through that prior experience that's relevant further up towards the top of your CV.
Yep. And so James is just sort of building maybe from a personal experience of, where the gap was a year and
Yeah.
dealing with a parent in hospice and their eventual passing.
Mm.
I mean, we're human beings.
Yeah.
It's sort of picking up on your point about the pandemic. I mean, like, this is real life. I didn't choose this. This happened. And honestly, if I was the interviewer, like, I like you more.
Yeah.
That, that's a behavioral answer to a question, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
no, I chose to park my career for a year
Yeah.
to take care of my family. And I'm going to go on a tangent here for a second, but pre-pandemic, to me, it's like the frame was work and life fit into that work frame somehow. And what's flipped is the frame is now life. And where does work fit into that frame? And she said, with no shame, like I'm not apologizing for taking care of my parents. We've got a client who former CXO of a public company and left to go take care of just exactly what James is describing. They relocated to go take care of aging, ailing parents. Like, good on you. Like I respect you more for doing that. Then Kelly, I'm gonna. Well, hang on. Here's the LinkedIn user question. I'm not sure who's asking this. When you talk about the value you've brought over your career, appreciate the impact you've made. This can be bigger and sometimes go beyond the numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. One way I quite like to show that on a CV, and I'm seeing this more and more, is if you've got a really good recommendation from somebody, perhaps how you've impacted them in their career, that speaks more to those kind of soft skills and that more, I guess, less measurable impact that you've had. Think about even including that on your resume if it fits with that story that you're telling. So I think that can be a good way to show that impact, show what your colleagues think of you beyond just the metrics.
Yep. It's funny. It's probably going back 2 or 3 years, but a lady that was in a job search group that I was, helping with, and she ended up, I might mess this up a little bit, but described herself as the glue lady because everybody told her she was the glue that held everything together. She was the glue that made the teams operate efficiently. And so I thought that was sort of like a great asset to claim, right? And then to be able to describe, obviously, how she did it, where that actually, sort of manifested itself. And again, not just stop at the adjective level, but like, now tell me what that really looks like. And then, what are we seeing here, James? Yeah. So what James is saying is the interviewer's response might be a great barometer for whether that company is a good fit for you or not. No empathy from the other side means you may not need to be there. Yes, Michelle Cordy, the glue lady.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good reason to be honest on your CV, because if you show up authentically and you give your reasons and they don't want to hire you, that can be a good red flag, perhaps, that they're not a very sympathetic employer in the first place.
Yeah, our very first guest on this a few weeks ago, Bill Mills, has 4 children with special needs. And he had that at the top of his, not CV, but kind of like his marketing document.
Okay, interesting.
And that was his reason for coming to Cincinnati, et cetera. And somebody said, who was a business owner, like, you need to take that off immediately. I would not hire you because all I'm thinking about is how my insurance costs are going up. Yeah. And so Bill is like, no, all you're telling me is I would never want to work for you because if that's how you feel about people and their families, then that's probably not a good fit for me culturally.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think transparency is best.
And the tables do seem to have turned, hiring's really picking up. I think a lot of the good companies are fighting for the best candidates. And so, I think it is a two-way process, and definitely it's as much about you evaluating the employer and finding that right fit as well, as you said.
So I'm going to get to a couple of these questions here in a second, but I want to make sure we don't kind of lose our overall narrative here. So, we've covered clarity, then we've covered, the importance of quantifying your accomplishments. And I think we just sort of agreed that it doesn't always have to be pure numbers. It can be other ways that you've impacted the organization culturally or otherwise. And then lastly, one of the things that you said about Chris was he knew his strengths. Even though he's looking to transition to a slightly different role, he knew exactly what transferable skills he had that would make him a strong fit. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I think, what I was thinking at with this is a lot of the time, especially when we've been in the same industry for a long time, particularly when we've been in the same company for a long time, it's very easy to talk in jargon and to not explain things in a way that really show our transferable skills. And I think it's really important, especially if you're looking to change industries, to perhaps get somebody who doesn't work in your company, doesn't work in your job, to read through your resume and say, does this make sense? What does this actually tell you about me? Do you understand what job I do based on this? I think I did a post about that recently. Sometimes you do get CVs, resumes, LinkedIn profiles written in such a way that they're so full of jargon that you don't know what that person actually does, what their soft skills are, what their strengths are, what they're actually doing as a job. And then as a recruiter, if you're trying to evaluate that person, it's very hard to know, okay, could they do this job that I'm recruiting for here? So I think it's important to, firstly, yes, know what your skills are, know what your strengths are, but then make sure that you're communicating that in a way that makes sense to the person who's reading your CV and making that sort of determination based on it.
Yep. Are there any assessment tools that you're a fan of to help people kind of, bring an objective and maybe even slightly scientific approach to teasing out what some of their strengths might be?
That's an interesting one. I did one recently myself, actually, which was called Life Languages. And that's like an online personality assessment, but it's quite in depth. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a lot of personality things. They're very much more based on your temperament. This is about how you communicate with others, how you actually kind of go about doing things and doing tasks. And that was really helpful. So I'm a doer. I'm someone who likes to finish projects. I'm very detailed, and it really helped me understand that, which I think is why I like writing resumes, because I like that detailed work. And when I start something, I like to finish it, and I'm a bit of a perfectionist with that. But sometimes we don't know those things about ourselves, right? So yeah, I'm sure there's lots of other good tools as well. That's one that I've had experience.
And that was called Life Languages?
Life Languages, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh, but I know there's lots of others. I can't remember the names.
Well, the one that I'm a fan of is Strength Finders.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
And it's pretty cheap. And you just alluded to this a second ago, but oftentimes we're not as self-aware as we'd like to think that we are.
Yeah.
And so that's just a blind spot by definition. And then in other cases, we might lack the vocabulary to, adequately articulate that.
Yeah.
Right. On a CV, LinkedIn profile, face-to-face kind of a discussion with somebody. And what I really like about those kinds of tools is, one, they highlight things.
Yeah.
And then two, they give me the language so that I can communicate it to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of free ones online as well, which if you're just looking to kind of get some idea, that could be a good place to start. But I think Strength Finders are a very in-depth one that you can do.
So Kelly's asking a question, and maybe this sort of relates to the strengths. And now we're trying to advance our career. And Kelly's saying, what do you recommend for the person who's looking to take a step up in the next job? It's not a role the person's done in the past, but feels that they are ready for now.
Yeah. I think, if you've got that experience, if you've got that track record, then absolutely you can position yourself for that roll up. And I think it's about, positioning yourself on your CV, on your resume for that more senior position. I think, one thing that you can do just very practically to do that is we talked about the headline where you're going to talk about the kind of the benefit that you bring for the organization. Yes. I think it can even help to put your target job title, and you can follow that by the word candidate. So you're not being kind of dishonest with that, but it might be, finance director candidate, just to really clearly identify these are the roles I'm going for. This is where I'm pitching myself, and quickly showing that you're aligned to those more senior positions. But I think it's also thinking about what skills are needed for those roles, perhaps compared to your current role, and making sure that you're highlighting those things, which is why it's important to get that clarity, as we talked about at the beginning, because if you know what the role is, you know what things you're going to focus on as you're crafting your pitch.
Yeah, I mean, where part of my mind goes in this is like, with some of the kind of core strengths that you bring, the accomplishments that you've had today. I'm taking basically your list in reverse order, right? And, kind of proof points that I've been able to exercise those strengths effectively, right? And now I've got clarity, like I am ready to go to the next step up. So, maybe it's just more scale. Hey, I was leading a team of 10. I'm looking to lead a team of 25 or 50, right? So same skills, just a bit more scale.
Yeah.
Right. Kelly's asking a question here. Would you recommend putting those personality profiles on a CV?
I don't tend to like it personally. I mean, it's a bit of kind of personal preference, I guess, with that. There might be some recruiters out there that appreciate those things. To me, I would steer clear of anything that feels too gimmicky on your CV or resume, because it could turn some people off. Instead, I think Bob's suggestion of using that language to inform how you describe yourself would be my preference. I don't know. What do you think, Bob?
So there's an old model. Do you remember who Laszlo Bock is? He used to be the head of people at Google. Back in the day. And he wrote a book called Work Rules. And back in 2014, he had a LinkedIn article talking about what he calls this XYZ format for bullets. I accomplished X as measured by Y by doing Z. And so, helped raise sales by 12%, which was equal to about $1 million by recruiting a new team, nailing the value proposition, and segmenting the marketplace.
Yeah.
Right. So I really like that model. And for me, it's the by doing Z, which is where you can start to weave in, some of those softer skills, some of those personality traits. So rather than, to your exact point, we're not leading with the feature, we're leading with the benefit.
Yeah.
But as we kind of get into it, it's almost like starting with why, Simon Sinek, right? We'll get to the how it works, right? And what it is exactly. But so then you could say, it's my creative problem solving skills that I was really, pleased to bring forward here, because we were stuck in this conundrum. Here's how we attacked it. We took this action. This was the result. That back in that STAR story kind of a format. But again, so we're not declaring creative problem solving, we're demonstrating creative problem solving.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that might be the difficulty with just putting your personality profile on there, is it's not really backed up or demonstrated, and it falls into that just kind of describing yourself with lots of adjectives problem, where it becomes a bit meaningless. But as you said, if you can wrap that in the context of an achievement, hey, this is how I did this, by leading with empathy, by clearly communicating to the team, that's how I kept everybody on board, or whatever it might be, that's going to be much more impactful than just saying, I'm a good team leader, for instance.
Yep. So let's take a question here, because this is, I think, very much in your lane, at least geographically. This is from Manavolao, if I didn't completely mess that up. He's from Fiji, which is awesome. He says, I have a question. I've been interviewing for roles in the Middle East. Recruiters have mentioned that I was a great candidate and I'd be a great fit, but they wouldn't move forward because of where I am from, geographical location. I don't know how to overcome this. It's like a roadblock. What would you do?
It depends what type of role you're going for. So for those that aren't familiar, in the Middle East market, it's a very, very expat-driven market. So most businesses will be sponsoring the visa of most of their employees. And that's very, very commonplace. So it's very, very multicultural. And generally, from my experience, people from every country and every walk of life are living and working in Dubai. So I think perhaps the issue is less so where you're from, and perhaps it's more to do with relocation costs, or even some of the issues with COVID at the moment, getting people into the country. So for very senior roles in the Middle East, companies might be willing to help people relocate and will pay that and will wait for people. But for other positions, they really just want someone that's already on the ground, because it minimizes that risk for them. So
Yeah.
my guess would be it's less so we don't want to hire someone from Fuji, and more we want someone that's already in the country because we need someone to start quickly, or we don't have the budget to relocate someone. In which case you would need to make the decision whether you want to visit Dubai, be there on the ground to do some interviews to show that you're kind of dedicated to being in the country. That is one way of doing things, but I know it's much difficult now post-COVID to do that.
Well, speaking of COVID, Jalil has a question. First of all, I'm glad you're getting a good value out of the conference call. Thank you, Jalil. So I want to make sure this is one question or two, but I have a question on the level of details you should have on your CV. Current pandemic situation, obviously widely spread remote work, which I think is massively a net positive. Would it be clear to include remote work skills? If yes, how?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an in-demand skill, to show that you're able to work remotely, especially if you're leading a team remotely. And I think, as we've been saying kind of throughout this, hopefully the message is coming across. We don't want to just list that as a skill, remote work, but if you can provide some context in your experience section, you could even do it. I do recommend under each role that you have on your CV, having a few lines just to give context about your position. That could be a good place to even say, working remotely as part of the team. I don't know that you need to kind of list remote working as a skill, but to include that detail in your CV could well be beneficial.
Yep. And I can see for roles that, might be in outsourced kinds of industries where you're providing the service, that being able to work effectively, remotely would be very advantageous for somebody. So that's cool. Well, I'm looking at the clock, and I want to be respectful of your time and everyone's time, because what is it, 6:30? Almost 6:30?
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to be very respectful of your time. This has been phenomenal. Is there anything, Hannah, that we haven't discussed or people haven't asked that you would want to make sure that they walk away from this call with?
I think we've really covered most points. I think the main thing is really get clear on what job you want, so that you can really sell the benefits of what you have to offer the company. And I think if you approach your LinkedIn, if you approach your CV with that mindset, and I think the second thing is back those statements up as much as you can. I think that would be the key message to get across when you're crafting that pitch, when you're putting those career documents together. What I would say is, if anyone's looking for further resources on how to do that, I know obviously Bob at Career Club has got some great resources on his website. I've also got resources over at the English Meeting Room, CV templates and CV guides to help you actually go through that process. So that would be a great place to head if you've got further questions about that.
Yeah, so thank you. And you took the last thing, that was perfect. No, but I even saw a YouTube video, Hannah, that you did where you were walking people through step by step.
Oh, yeah.
And it's free. So, I really appreciate that. And I know that the community, appreciates everything that you're doing. This has been awesome. I had high expectations and you exceeded them. So thank you. I want to thank everybody who's taken the time to either join us live or will be listening to this on replay. Heather, thank you so much for, again, the magic that makes all this happen. And Hannah, thanks so much. And I hope you enjoy your holiday.
Thank you. You too, Bob. And thanks everyone for joining us.
Cheers.